Hey everyone, happy Wednesday. This is Cherie Burton, and this is Women Seeking Wholeness, a podcast for those who long to feel, express, and be who they were created to be. Today, I've got Isabel Chiara, the author of Eat Your Words, her new book, expertly couches life lessons, her life lessons in the experiences of an uber relatable girl whose early curvaceous entry into womanhood and her equally hearty Italian appetite make for a complex carb tale about the depth of our relationship with self-nourishment. And you guys know I'm all about self-nourishment. It's a path and a practice, actually a life practice and spiritual practice that I'm constantly trying to find my groove with, my flow with. So today, she and I are going to talk about how to respond to self-abusive internal dialogue while you're eating. You know, you can have an understanding of mindful eating in theory, but you haven't quite found the spiritual connection to manifest it as a practicality. We all know that our food choices affect how we feel on all levels, but often it's hard to translate that into real life and real world applications. So as we kind of are looking at rounding out this year and looking at some of our habits, always it feels like most of us as women, and a lot of men too, are wanting to revamp their eating habits. So I think you'll really enjoy this episode. Remember, you can follow me on Instagram, cherie.burton, and ask to join our private Facebook group, Women Seeking Wholeness. So here we go with Isabel. Isabel, well, based on our pre-conversation, I can tell that this is going to be an interesting convo. Welcome.
It sure is. Thank you so much for having me, Cherie.
Well, let's just dive right into this whole eating debacle, right? I mean, I just have a question for you. Why do you think on a spiritual, energetic level that women grapple with food so much?
Why do I think they're grappling with food? Because
the practice of eating in and of itself.
Because I think there's so many emotional, transformational things that are going on in the world today. And for women, you know, it's not just starting now. It's been going on for women who are women that are trying to come to voice. So because of that, I mean, if you think about it, food's the gift, right? Because it's helping them. Sometimes it's just their painful situations that they're going through. Sometimes they have to, it's just too much on the body. It's too much on the system to sit there and just be feeling all these emotions inside of them. And they need to take a break. I mean, really, food is really trying to digest really what's going on for them in the world. I mean, we came from, you know, not having a lot of rights also some of us growing up, or, you know, prior to that. We know that we've seen our mothers, if not, go through some of these experiences that, you know, we weren't allowed to have credit or go out in the world and take care of ourselves, because we, as a woman, didn't have credit, you know, in the 60s. I mean, I think got it in the 70s. We're able to start to get that for ourselves. So we had to, you know, sit in situations that didn't work for us. So can't think of a better way to suppress some of our emotions than food.
Than to eat, literally eat. And you said, well, I mean, your book, I should say, is called Eat Your Words.
Right.
So sort of your theory or thesis is that women have been suppressed through voice, through actually verbal expression of their rights, having credit, as you say, or having literally input or a voice in any context in many circles. But it's kind of like to regain power or to self-soothe. What do you think or both maybe?
It's both. Well, I think it's both. It's really self-soothe, really. And sometimes we don't even know what's lurking underneath that. You know, we don't know what's lurking, what is underneath all that. We don't know if we're what the real feelings are if we continue to eat and to suppress what's really going on.
So when somebody is, let's just say, kind of going unconscious, and they're just, I mean, they may have some awareness that they're not thinking about what they're eating, that they're just eating, well, maybe even binging, maybe just eating it because it's there, you know, all those unconscious behaviors we do with food. Mm-hmm. How do you break, what have you found to be effective to sort of like wake that up to where they would want to have awareness? Because what I found is, like, if I'm on a self-soothing process with food, we'll just say in a nice way. Isn't
it nicer to say it like that? So I'm on a self-soothing instead of, oh my God, I can't eat like this. Or,
I totally bypass that.
In itself, what you're saying right now is really a lot of the key. It's the words we're saying to ourselves, because they get stuck in our, we're really parenting ourselves when we eat. Mm-hmm. And making ourselves wrong and making ourselves bad. So I think step number one is to really look at every single thing we say to ourselves and really just catch ourselves in it. So, I mean, it's not going to happen overnight, but really just seeing what things can we say. It's about really love and self-compassion of ourselves, because let's just really be honest, why we really have been eating like we have been eating or not is because we have listened to society. We have demanded ourselves to start to do diets. We've restricted ourselves, which is what we're really fighting against. We're really trying to come to voice so we don't feel restricted and we don't feel deprived. And yet here we are. I mean, if anybody has a food thing, they've tried 20 diets, right?
Right.
Or more. So we're trying to get past that.
So the bigger issue is not like, how am I, meeting my needs with food, pigging out, whatever the language needs to be, right?
Right.
The real language. But the bigger issue is what's been put on me that I would even make that judgment. What has society told me about eating?
Right.
That I would even go there to think I'm a pig or whatever it is.
Yeah. And we're really saying to ourselves constantly with these words, right? We're really saying to ourselves that we're so unacceptable the way we are.
That's the deeper issue. Yes.
Yes.
So we're bucking up against that standard of thinness or propriety. Mm-hmm. It's ladylike. Let's just say, I remember being told, I can't even remember. It was just some adult woman that came and spoke at an event I was at when I was younger, probably in my teen years. And she said, when you're on a date, only order like a salad. You don't want to have any, you don't want to like be chewing. You don't want to have any finger food. Like there was all these like etiquette things around, but it was for the man. Right. So that you look a certain way, that you have this propriety around that date so that he'll accept you. So he'll think you're a lady. And I locked that in for a long time. Like, yeah. And then after a while I was and one of the reasons that my husband and I really hit it off is that when we first started dating, he goes, I love that you actually eat. Here he is, 27, I'm 26. We're dating. We first met each other and we go to a restaurant and I'm actually eating food. I'm ordering real food. I'm not just getting a salad because I rebelled against that. And he's like, that's really refreshing to be on a date and have a girl actually eat. And I thought, how many girls internalize that? Right. That it's not okay to actually eat.
Right.
One more story really quick, and then I want your opinion on this.
Go ahead.
My daughter, Savannah, that's 22 now, almost 23. When she was going to high school, so not that long ago, she told me that like, none of the girls, and then she was in a 5A high school, super huge high school here in Utah Valley.
Yeah.
She's like, Mom, none of the girls eat in the cafeteria. They're not eating. And I'm like, what do you mean?
Wow.
She said they either leave and go eat in their car or they go out somewhere. So it was just like, they're not actually eating. It's like a cultural thing at our school. And I'm going, are you kidding me?
That's so unusual. I didn't know it was that extreme. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, like, I mean, I'm sure it's not all the girls, but the girls
Well, I think
that she
that whole
was,
hiding, right? That whole hiding thing.
Yeah,
is
that creating that secretive.
We've also experienced it on another level. Also, you're talking about like you were told not to eat certain things, but I talk about this in my book also that I never let anybody know what I was, because I was snacking in the car, snacking here, and I never told people what I was doing either. I was very ashamed. So I think that shame kind of sits with us, or comes from somewhere and it just sits with us. And I actually never spoke about it till just recently when I wrote my book, because it's really my life has been, or this character's life is about really hiding her, food as an answer to everything in her life, like any kind of emotion, any kind of situation. And because of that, she's got this other secret life that no one knows about, and not willing to talk about, not willing to express, or, doesn't even want to look at it, because really we don't think of food as that, like that it's a problem, or
it's also seen like as a temptation, almost like you could kind of look at like religious programming in some respects of different things that were seen as temptations for the body. Like our physical appetites need to be tamed. And so there's this fear, and this creates secrecy and shame. There's this fear of like, my body's out of control. I'm out of control. I'm just this vehicle of temptation, honestly, or succumbing to it. And so there's a lot of these messages we get about our body being bad, that it's just animalistic and flesh and all of the sin around that. Right. And I think for some women, eating can become a guilty pleasure in the way that you're talking about with the secrecy. And it's like an acceptable addiction in some respects. So it feels a little like she can't really, and I'm talking from my own experience too, like I couldn't fully be in my body because anything that was pleasurable, I shamed myself for.
Right.
And I think eating is to be pleasurable, right? But we're taught that at least there's this really subtle programming that anything pleasurable needs to be really kept in check. And then it just becomes this whole shaming process.
Right. Well, I think that's a lot from our upbringing, right? And how we hold a lot of our stories about what we can or cannot do.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like very early programming.
Really how we receive in life, right? We can't just receive. There has to be some kind of condition to it. There has to be some kind of like earning, like we have to earn it on some level, or deserve it on some level. To be
worthy of that, yeah.
Yeah. So really, if we really look at it, food has, which is something we can really like inform our bodies. I like to inform my body that we do deserve. Like there was never any limitations put on anything except for what our minds or the stories that have limited us to do in our life. So if we think of it like that, then if we didn't have that sense of deprivation on some level, we would say, oh, here's a bag of potato chips. I feel like having one or two, and we have a little craving and we just have one or two instead of, oh, here I am, we'll have the whole bag. That's really kind of where we go to a lot of times. Yeah. So it's, I like to say that we get to hear our words and receive ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that becomes the nourishment that we're seeking. for ourselves, and then we don't have to fill it with other things. But we could, right? But we could, and it's okay.
Right.
So
there's just
the problem
more
comes
judgment on that.
Say it's not okay, then we can't even digest whatever we're eating because we already informed our bodies. Okay, well, it's not okay what you just had. So like, you're kind of choking on it at some level.
I was just talking to, we did another episode about, with Esther Blum about nutrition and the gut biome and things like that. And we didn't go really into the stuff that we're talking about, which is kind of the psychology of eating and the implications that are like in the subconscious. But in the episode with her, I told her that I had gone to England and I ate a lot. I mean, there was just this afternoon, we went to this tea. It was so English. Like there was this high noon tea and all these pastries, like I'm talking trays, like they stacked these trays and gave it to us, and cream and scones and danishes and things like that. And what was so interesting about that is I wasn't in shame when I was eating it. I was just immersed in the environment. It was sensually amazing. Like that scone with that clotted cream and the jam was the best thing I ever ate. And the conversation and the chandeliers and just the old English, like there was a pianist there and live. And so I thought about that a lot because I have a book called Nourishing Wisdom. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It was written quite a while ago, but the author, he talks about how we metabolize basically what you're saying, that we metabolize our meals based on the environment inside and outside of us while we're eating. So if we're in a high pressure situation and we're eating something and then it's nourished, like, let's just say it's healthy. Let's say it's a healthy food.
Yes.
We're actually not going to uptake the nutrition or metabolize that healthy, quote unquote, food, as opposed to we're in the super high vibe environment. There's the internal dialogue is really high frequency and we're enjoying it and slowing down, and we're eating junk food. Right. But it's a high environment that it's almost like you neutralize that food because you're the one, it's your biochemistry, it's your mood, it's your, so I think about that.
It's like you're resonated with that food. Like the food has become part of your digestion. Everybody, all of your organs are in alignment. Your brain's in alignment, everything, all your words are in alignment. And there's like this resonance that helps all of those nutrients get absorbed in your system. I totally agree with that concept. I can't wait to read that book.
Nourishing Wisdom is so good.
Amazing. And I believe that. I believe that for sure.
Yeah, because I didn't have stomach upsets after that. I normally would have, eating all that, right? And I didn't gain any weight on that trip. The whole trip was a sensual amazement. Right. I was in my divine feminine vibe mode. At the same time, I also realized I do need nutrients. I can't just eat like that all the time and expect, because I have biochemical needs. But I've been thinking a lot about food sensitivities for people who have, let's say, gluten intolerance or a dairy sensitivity. I wonder if someone told them, and I'm not saying they don't have that, but if a doctor or somebody told you you have this, you're going to develop such a fear around those substances. And that fear is, if you do eat those substances, is going to combust, as opposed to the resonance you're talking about.
And I think it goes beyond that too, because I think it's also environmental and cultural, like what we're reading, and we then apply it to us. Oh, well, I probably have a gluten intolerance too, or I probably have, I can't have bread, or I can't have
carbs. We're all afraid of carbs.
Which is a whole process also that I even have gone through. Now I add grains, and carbs to my meals because what I think, the body eventually revolts against that if we're doing too much of the new keto plan.
Right. Yeah.
So,
well, yeah. And I have to tell you too. So I did a whole episode on this, but I went to Costa Rica and I prepared to do an ayahuasca journey for 4 nights in a row. And there was a whole thing leading up to it where you have to, it's called a dieta. You have to eat a certain way. And it's very plant-based, conscious. And and it was kind of hard to eat like that, but I was so excited to do the journey. So, and then while we were there in Costa Rica, of course you have the, you know, the beauty of the surroundings, but there was also like a chef on site who was cooking everything for us, and it was super healthy. Mm-hmm. So we go through this journey, and then when I got home, and it's like a whole thing, I can't even, but
that's another story.
It's a whole thing. But when I came home, I was no longer attracted to the same foods. Something altered, like I wanted to eat less meat, and that has still persisted. Actually, I was vegetarian for a long time after that. And then I slowly added meat back in because I just didn't want it. It was just weird. I've always been a meat eater. And now the reason I bring that up is, when we're talking about deep listening and really getting into your body and asking, well, what do I want? Okay, here's what the world is saying. The world is saying, I need this much protein and this many carbs, and and I can't exceed this many calories, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. Or I can't have dairy, or I can't this or that. And when we're really deeply listening, don't you feel like we'll kind of download our own dieta?
For sure.
Like it's maybe, I hate the word diet anyway, but plan, what, I don't know, eating regime. I don't even, what's a good word for that?
I have the same situation. Of course, I didn't do the ayahuasca, but
I highly recommend it, and I don't recommend it. I'm just saying it's not for everyone. I probably will never do it again.
I was actually, I was actually told not to do it.
Yeah, I've been told not to do it
not
anymore.
By anybody, by my own,
I met many people, and it called me for 2 years, and I got what I needed, and I moved on. Right. Yeah. But it's not for everyone.
Yes, it is.
But it's what I needed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Totally cool. And so what was it? We were talking about,
like, well, I won't do ayahuasca, but
right. The same situation was, and that, what's calling, because I was a really huge meat eater myself. And as I do still, I crave it a lot of times. It's much less. And I am craving more vegetables and more grains for my own diet right now, which I'm following. And then if I crave something else, I think that it's a good thing to allow myself to have that, some form of whatever that is. Because your mind is actually, or your brain is actually telling you what we're looking for this right now. We're looking for some form of this. Yeah. And our system wants it. So
you should honor that.
I almost think it's worse if we don't honor it.
Yeah. You talked about deprivation earlier, and it's kind of like your parents saying, don't date that boy. Right.
Yeah. You're like, oh my God,
I makes you want to date him even more.
Right.
And when you say don't eat sugar, that's all you're thinking about. You're in an avoidance pattern.
I think if we say don't to ourselves, the moment we say don't, we're really telling ourselves yes.
That's powerful.
It's kind of, I had another thing that I've noticed too. I noticed, like, if I'm driving down the highway and I see billboards and there's specific foods, if I look at the food and it almost like is calling my brain, right? So now I started a process of actually answering to that, whatever that craving is. Like, for instance, if it's McDonald's, I'll answer that. Okay, well, that could be. I don't sit there and say no, but right. I don't necessarily run. I don't run over to get McDonald's, but I say, okay, well, what is it about? What do I want about that? Is it?
What is it that I'm craving around that? What is triggering? Yeah.
Is it the meat? Is it what is it? Is the and then.
Yeah. I crave, like, do you know what I really crave is like custard and cream and ice cream and like rich food and cheesecakes. And I'm thinking, for me, what fills that is coconut cream, which is, that rises to the top if you get canned coconut milk. And that does it for me. And it's super healthy. And
But I would ask also, is that something that was a comfort food when you were a child?
Oh yeah. I used to, you know what I used to eat all the time? Well, my parents used to go to a dairy farm and get real cow's milk, which they actually have in England. Their milk is yellow there. Yeah. Their reduced fat milk is like half and half. And I was loving it. Yeah. Anyway, but I crave, yes. So when I was younger, it was cream of wheat, which is, some people have heard of it. Some people haven't.
Same texture.
And then I would add the cream to it. And my mom said as a baby, I would just devour it. Like, and that has persisted my whole life. I love that kind of stuff. And so when I get into like, sometimes only cream of wheat and heavy cream or half and half with sugar does it. And I don't feel bad about it. I don't have it all the time. Right. But it just feels that like, oh, I love being alive. Right. You know, like life is great. I'm going to gobble this up. Right. As I did it when I was a baby or however old I was. I think I was a very young toddler when my mom was feeding that to me. So
you see how you could track it back to where it started. Yeah.
Yes. And I've done a lot of, my food journey has been, as every woman's has, but I'm, 52 and I can look back and see there was a time that I was doing beauty pageants. And so I was really focused on health and wellness and everything that I could learn. And then I had a certain persona after I won the pageant of having this title and being known this way. And then just having children and that whole process of what I was craving in pregnancy and having really high blood pressure during pregnancy and having to be induced early and holding on to weight after. And there's just so many, and then the hormonal shifts with perimenopause, menopause, all of those things. Yes. It seems like food has been the central sun in my path with my body and my path with even to claim my own self-worth and to be in my body.
So do you see how it's ultimately a gift, right?
Yes.
It's really, the food is really what's bringing us on this journey to really discover our inside and to really release a lot of the patterns in our life and beliefs in our life, because you're looking at it because you want to release the food journey, your food habits. But in reality, it's making you look at every other part of your body, your mind, your psyche. So it's we
need food. Like if I was an alcoholic and I was trying to heal from an alcohol addiction, well, I could abstain from alcohol. But if you have a food addiction, which most of us do, you need food. And I worked with somebody when I was coaching her, and she was going to Overeaters Anonymous, which is a very strict, I don't know if you're familiar with their protocols, but
I walked in, I walked out.
Yeah, it's very deprivation based.
Just,
and a little bit shame based, and like you're labeling yourself. You're showing up. Yes. I'm an overeater, just like you're saying I'm an alcoholic, right?
It made me go look for other alternatives.
But there was a metaphor that she told me that stuck with me also about food. And it was kind of what I was saying about the alcohol addiction. Like you can close the cage, right? You don't have to take alcohol. You don't need it to survive, but you have to have food. So she's like, when you're a food addict, truly a food addict, and she was very obese. She's like, it's like taking you have to take the tiger out of the cage several times a day and pet it. Yes. And put it back in the cage. Not to her. It was that big. It was that intense. And she was a severe binger. So,
I think that comes down to like what you're saying. That's where the words of compassion come in. The petting of the tiger is talking to ourselves in a more compassionate way. And because it's really the emotion that's driving us to a certain food or these behaviors.
Right.
Right. So I think ultimately it's the compassion and the love that we have to show ourselves. What I found is a great solution for myself that I would offer to your listeners also, and yourself.
So what does that process look like for you? Like, what kind of things do you say to yourself?
When I acknowledge what the emotion is, because I was, a lot of my life was spent out of my body. So, and not connecting. So for me, it's important to acknowledge what feelings are coming up. And also looking at, so this is up, what's okay. It's okay. You know, yeah, for me, it's to say okay to myself. And, you know, I get you. I get where this is coming from. And I associate a lot of visual pictures with it on, you know, because right now I feel like what's happening in the world is really bringing a lot of feelings and patterns and emotions up for us to look at and transform. So really looking at what they are, really feeling them, and really moving. We don't have to get rid of it. I don't ever say get rid of anything, but just acknowledge that it is there for yourself. And then through that, you can find a solution to just knowing that it's there, like a solution to, okay, it's there. And next time it shows up, you can say, okay, well, we know this. Right? We know this. It's been a part of us. It's brought us to this point. And saying to ourselves, okay, we got this. Like
you say,
patting the tiger.
Patting the tiger. And it is a gift, right? You talked about it before as a gift.
Yes.
And just that reframe of what is this teaching me and showing me? Well, thank you. Like being able to thank it. Those emotions that they're really not about the food, you know, like you're saying, we don't want to say any of this stuff is bad, because once we start doing that, we're pushing it away. It shows up like a baby that's like, I have to eat right now, you know? So it shows up and it starts, you know, pounding at us more and more and more until we do something with it. And the choice of what we normally have done in the past is food, eating. I also think it's great to disassociate, find another thing, like disassociate the connection between feelings and now I'm going to take care of my feelings by choosing some kind of food. You know, maybe we choose another behavior. And to interrupt that pattern, you know, if it is like looped in your neurocircuitry or it's habitual,
it's always loopy.
Yeah, you have to move your body. It's an embodiment piece. Like you either have to go out for a walk or you have to do something with your body, because the act of eating, of course, is with your body. But kind of where I want to wrap this up is we're kind of where we started, where you said women are trying to come to voice. How can we use food as a way to facilitate that versus suppressing that?
By speaking to ourselves, by acknowledging ourselves in the process and saying, oh, I'm feeling sad right now. I'm feeling this right now, because then we come to voice with ourselves, and then we would still come to voice with other people around us, you know, when we were having different experiences also, because a lot of times when things are happening, we say, oh, you know what? I'm just not going to say anything. Right?
Yeah. Well, because we're people pleasers.
And we're feeling stuff, and we start to not allow ourselves to say anything. Oh, that person's going to not going to react well with us. So we don't say anything, but there's a way to say everything. You know, there's a nice way to present things. There's a nice way to say things. You can always acknowledge yourself by saying, I'm feeling like this right now. You know, help me understand what's going on is another way to communicate.
Children are really good at that. Children tell you what they're feeling and what's not good and what's not right, and their own little self-advocacy, right? And then we start to shut that down. Awesome. Well, I just have one last question for you that I want to ask. Most people understand mindful eating in theory, as we're discussing, right? But what if they haven't found maybe that spiritual connection to manifest it in the practical, right? Because everything, as you know, everything is spiritual before it becomes physical. Everything is energy before it manifests as matter.
Right.
So how do you take this idea of mind? You know, let's just say, oh, I really like what they're saying, Isabel and Cherie, and I really want to become more mindful and self-compassionate and advocate for myself. But for me, it's almost like there might be a spiritual connection they need to make first.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you do this? How is this done? How have you found to make this connection?
Well, I first say, because, for some people have been trying for so long, right?
Yeah.
So create the intention for yourself. That's most important, that I'm going to really listen and pay attention to myself. Right. And I always like to create that I'm going to have a lot of resolution around this. And then I think we get to look at it as shifting habits one step at a time. Right. What are we going to do differently? And it's not a big thing. And it's not about taking away like chocolate. It's not that. Mm-hmm. I'm going to start to listen to all of the words that I'm saying to myself during the day. And then you start to write down a list of what they are. And so maybe you're not going to catch everything, but you're going to become very conscious and very aware. And then you can figure out in the course of this week or however you're going to be doing this, which hopefully will change to a lifetime. Mm-hmm. How can I change these words to appreciate myself more, or to show myself more compassion and more love? Mm-hmm. So just turning the words that we say to ourselves, mm-hmm. I think that is the real key. And it's a process, and we get to look at it as a process, and we get to inform our bodies too that, okay, this is a process. I'm not going to figure it out all in one day.
So as far as the spiritual connection I was talking about, let's just say they're really struggling with the right words. There's something in their subconscious or something where they're hearing those old tapes that were told to them, or they're kind of mulling over it and they just can't quite find the spiritual connection to eating. Mm-hmm. Just forging it as is maybe like a spiritual practice, which in Nourishing Wisdom and some of the other books I've read, they all say eating is a spiritual practice.
I agree. But I think listening to ourselves is the most spiritual we can be. So if a lot of times when we're eating, we're listening to this, like, it's almost like it's an inner voice, but it's almost like an outside voice going, now, do it now. Mm-hmm. So listening to this voice inside of us that is underneath that voice. Yes. Is really key. So,
and it's usually subtle, right?
If somebody said to me, and people always say this to me, hey, take a pause before you eat. That's great. I never did. I am doing it now, but that couldn't be
power of the pause.
That couldn't be my first step. Yeah. That was never my first step. Mine was just like, hey, even after I ate, I was like, what did I say right before I ate? I would go back and think, hey, what was I saying? Because then, you're in that mode where you're kind of digesting. So you can kind of breathe. So then you get to say, okay, what was I saying? What were those words? And then you're like, okay, we're going to do this. We could do this differently next time, or we could do, talk a little differently to ourselves.
Yeah, perfect. Well, Isabel, how can people find you online? And I know your book is called Eat Your Words. Is that just on Amazon? Where's the best place people can get that?
It's on Amazon right now. There's links on my website. They can actually get a free chapter download.
And your website is eatyourwords.com.
It's actually Isabel-Chiara.com. So ISABEL Chiara, CHIARA.com.
Okay.
And there they could get the free download. But Eat Your Words is on Instagram also.
Yes. And I found you there. Well, thank you so much for your time. This was really fun, actually, and engaging for me. And I'm renewing my vow to myself to listen to myself. So thank you.
Good.
I appreciate the different viewpoints on eating and the act of nourishing. And I really do think it's a personality thing. How we're built based on our past experiences and our genetic coding and whatever has a lot to do with our nourishment style. And so I just like bringing on so many different voices of women who are talking about kind of the same thing, about how to feed ourselves on all these different levels, how we self-sabotage, and why we avoid self-soothings, at least in healthy ways. So I hope you continue to follow us because I've got some cool things coming up in 2022. I'm getting ready to revamp the Stand, Speak, Shine School. It's undergoing some construction right now, and it will come back, I think, more beautiful, deep, meaningful, but actually more concise and to the point. So I'll go over 12 feminine embodiment principles. It's a 12-week program, and you can go at your own speed. You can marinate on one principle and come back to it later, or you can blast through all 12. But I've created it in a way that I think is very doable and very easy to track. So talking about practicality here, 2022 is the year of the feminine. It's a master number, 22. And I'm so excited to see how things bridge actually with humanity and the earth, and how more and more people will continue to awaken. So stay tuned for that. And you can get on the wait list if you want. Just go to either CherieBurton.com or StandSpeakShine.com. And as always, follow me on social media for the latest stuff, Cherie.Burton on Instagram, and the Women Seeking Wholeness private Facebook group on Facebook. Have a glorious week, and we'll talk to you next time on Women Seeking Wholeness.